Hello and welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you for joining us. This is Safe, Seamless, Sold Out, Reimagining Security for Modern Sports Venues. It's presented by Xtract One, and we will get started in just a moment. As you're entering the webinar platform here, I want to give you a couple instructions, and these are the instructions that I give for every episode of SBJ Live, and they relate to your interaction and your engagement and your method of finding the most value in this experience. So there's two things you can do that involve your interaction and engagement. One, you can chat with us, and there's a chat feature in the bottom right of your screen where I would love it if everyone who is in here would introduce themselves and tell us who they are and what they do. And if you see people in the chat who you know and you want to say hello to them, please do that. We encourage that type of interaction here at SBJ Live. And then directly to the left of the chat feature is our questions feature. I've got a ton of questions for our panelists, but we want your questions. We want your interaction, your engagement, and your questions. So put your questions in the chat feature whenever they pop into your head. There's no specific Q&A feature at the end. So make sure you're putting those questions in there as soon as they pop into your head. The advantage of putting them in there soon is that you will have the best chance of getting upvotes. And the questions with the most upvotes are more likely to get answered by our panelists here. So that's two things. Introduce yourself in the chat, and then also put your questions in the questions tab. And then beyond that, just sit back and enjoy. And we hope you get value and information that you can take to your day-to-day from this session with Xtract One and with Liverpool Football Club. I see some people introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you so much for doing so. Let's get started. I want to give each of our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. We have Peter Evans, the CEO from Xtract One, and Chris Markey. He's the Vice President of Safety, Security, and Operations from Liverpool Football Club. I'll start with Peter. Peter, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Dan. And of course, thank you, Chris, for joining us today. I'm the CEO of Xtract One. I love what we do. I think we've got great innovation, great technology, but most importantly, we have great customers that we get to work with. I've been in tech a long, long time, therefore a lot of the white hair and the beard here. I've done everything from telecom to cybersecurity to SaaS and now physical security. And I couldn't be more happy to be on this call today with you, Dan, and of course with Chris.
Thank you, Peter. Chris.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, Chris Markey. I'm the Vice President, Safety, Security and Operations at Liverpool Football Club. I've been with the club coming up for 9 years now. But prior to that, I was 30 years in the local police in Merseyside over in Liverpool. And yeah, it's great to be on this call and hopefully share some learning that we've had working with Xtract One and also around how we've been enhancing our security overlay at the stadium and other parts of our estate, so to speak.
Thank you, Chris. Gentlemen, let's start the discussion this way. Let's think about the biggest security and guest experience challenges that stadiums, arenas are facing today. And I think the wording is important there, right? It's security and guest experiences, and we can get into how those overlap throughout the conversation. But let's start there, and let's start with Chris. Chris, what do you see as the biggest security and guest experience challenges that stadiums are facing?
I think I can probably give an example of where we've come through over at Liverpool at Anfield during the last season. We're about to enter a phase of where we're implementing legislation in the country that comes from the Manchester Arena bombing attack in 2017. And basically, every premises has got to have its security regime ready for inspection by the Home Office Department, so the SIA, and we've been looking at our security regime for a number of years, and this year we took this big step to go to 100% searching. Not every stadium in the country, well, a football stadium, does 100% searching, and that was a bit of a culture change. And for our supporters and everybody coming to the stadium, that's one of the biggest challenge we have with increasing your security overlay. There's a concept in UK and Europe called safety, security and service, and they all mean exactly what they sound like. You know, safety is infrastructure, management plans, security is your infrastructure, your stewarding, but your service is how you treat your patrons, your supporters, your everybody coming to your events. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is getting that balance right. You know, we we got to a situation where we were having people outside the stadium post kickoff, long queues, because we introduced another process into what we call the ingress process. So the biggest challenge for us, I think, is actually one, not impacting on the event experience to the degree that it has a negative impact, but we've got to keep people safe, and it's that balance, I think, is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that, Chris. Like what we're seeing is, look at security and guest experience, and it doesn't matter if it's physical security at a stadium or doing your online banking or your credit cards. Security and guest experience kind of butt heads. The more security we add, the poorer the guest experience. I think it now takes me 7 steps to log on to salesforce.com. That's really annoying because I just want to do my work. And so the more we increase security, the more there's a poor guest experience. But increasing security is a necessity. The world is getting more and more risky. We see it every day in the news. The flip side is the guest experience is, or their expectation is much higher. You know, I paid thousands of dollars to go see U2 at the Sphere or the Foo Fighters at Anfield, or, you know, these sorts of things. And so there's an expectation of a high guest experience. So both are getting higher demands, and you get this headbutting. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges that security is having, as Chris said, to find that balance. And, you know, our view is that the same technologies and processes that may have been used 50 years ago don't necessarily apply to today's business problems. I mean, think about it. If we did this webinar with technologies from 50 years ago, we'd all be on a fax machine right now, which is kind of laughable. Imagine the 3 of us conversing via fax machine. But things like the walk-through metal detector and hand wands, they were developed 50 years ago. So one wouldn't apply 50-year-old technology to solve a modern-day problem. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people are finding is, like, how do I find that balance, but leveraging technology, processes, security stewards in the right way.
Thank you both. That's a great way to set the stage for this. I want to go into a little bit of detail maybe about the welcoming experience for guests and how important that is, and talk us through a little bit how to improve both the welcome, the pleasantness of the welcoming experience, while also making sure that you're doing all of the detection and having the best effective detection procedures as possible without interfering with that pleasant experience that everyone wants when they're entering a venue. Peter.
Yeah, well, so in our case, I'll be a little bit selfish here. You know, what we and others in the industry, we're not unique, have done is to develop technologies leveraging sort of software and digital transformation. So again, I'll go back to an analogy. We all used to go to a brick and mortar bank to, you know, get our cash our checks, get our money. We all used to go to brick and mortar retail stores to buy our shirts and clothes and ties and things. But the world has digitally transformed all these business segments. I do most of my shopping online. I do all my banking online. But physical security has not heretofore gone through that same sort of digital transformation, leveraging software, leveraging innovation to change that game. And with, you know, with technology like ours, other people, there are ways to say, okay, can I use different innovation to allow an individual, for example, to walk through with their smartphone and just keep on walking like they're walking into the grocery store or the bank or whatever, without having to take out all their personal items and divest and have their bags searched. Was kind of a bit of a, you know, we get into privacy concerns there. So technology can create a different dynamic and a different experience to allow people to, you know, in a fast and frictionless way, just enter a facility, but actually provide more security than you would previously. Quick example, we do a lot of work in Europe where the common security process is a pat down. That gets a little questionable in this day and age about strangers patting people down. And you get scenarios where by law you can't inspect a child under the age of 15, for example. And is it really effective? If I'm just checking someone's pockets, well, maybe they've got an ankle holster. Maybe they've got a knife hidden in their hat or something like that. And so we found in side-by-side tests, technology can actually become unbiased, very objective, ensure a full scan, but do so in 1/10 of the time that it might take from historical methods. So there is a way to kind of break that conundrum of the guest experience and the security experience butting heads.
Yeah, Chris, I'll flip it to you. And if you can think about it, a similar question, but maybe think about it from the perspective of your own venue and maybe either, you know, what challenges, what mistakes did you make, if you're willing to say so? And then what success stories do you have when it comes to detection effectiveness and also making sure that guests have a good experience upon entry?
I think just to touch on the experience points, I think you still got to invest in your staff and you know that welcoming. We take a big pride in that experience starts before people attend the venue. So in respect of any technology that you're doing, whether it's we've introduced frictionless bars, and you know do people even digital ticketing? So we've gone to digital ticketing and encrypted NFC ticketing. So people have got to be prepared for it. You know, we were laughing just before we came on the call about the technology challenges that us three had getting us on the call. And, you know, you put 61,000 people into a stadium, there are going to be some people who are going to find those technologies challenging. So I think the first part is around explaining to people what it is they're doing. I mean, we on the first we did a pilot with the smart scanners, and you know, people were coming up waving the ticket at the scanner. They thought it was, you know, did we brief it out right? Did we educate the fan as to what was happening and how it was working? And probably not. That was probably and I've had a meeting today with our supporters board, and they've asked us to go out with some refreshed communication for the start of the season about our security posture, and that will make life a lot easier. So yes, certainly that was one of the things I think we could have done a lot better. You know, we were under a little bit of pressure. Peter's team got onto site very quickly and set us up, and then we were sort of learning a little bit on the fly with our supporters as to how this would all work. I think the other thing about it is, you know, your staff training. It is a different process. It's making people understand that they can walk at a certain pace and keep that flow going. You know, we on a couple of early occasions we had turnstiles empty and people walking through. Well, you've got to keep the whole thing joined up. You hold, so you learn as you go. And I think it's just that as long as getting the staff comfortable with the tech, that they can sort of keep things flowing, and certainly that helped us out. I think mistakes that we made, well, I mean, the classic was on one occasion we'd failed to pair the two systems up right, and we wondered why we were getting an inordinate amount of alerts. Simple things like that. Peter came out for the concerts, and we had one particular issue at one particular entrance point, and we established that the level wasn't quite right, and that was throwing the readings off. So there's setup, there's certainly training, but I think definitely educating the supporter coming through the tech as to how it works and how effective it is, and that will all enhance that experience, and people start to flow through it. And I think Josh was really surprised. I think we got absolutely record numbers of fans per minute coming through the scanners, because once we got it going, we got up to 71 at one point, didn't we, or something like that, which was all down to learning and training the staff.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. And I think we had two events back to back. One of them peaked out at 74 people per lane going through. Another event was peaking out at 78 people, and that's kind of a record for us. So, you know, good on you for doing that. But I think it speaks to the fact that what you're talking about is really good training and people becoming accustomed to this system. Yeah. And that's true of anything. My daughter gives me her iPhone. I'm a Samsung guy, and every time I use it, I'm lost, right? But I'm sure if I used it for 5 days, I would all of a sudden become an iPhone expert. You know, put me in a car that I've never driven before, I'm probably going to grind the gears once or twice, but you get that flow. It's like any technology. And we have very good customers who will tell us, you know, it took us about 2-3 weeks to really fine tune the flow. And sometimes it's as simple as, what if I take the lane and I just move it over 1 foot? And all of a sudden things are flowing a little bit better and people are just streaming in. So it takes a little while to kind of work that out. It's a combination of the technology plus the people plus the processes. And, you know, Chris, you raised a really good point. The team over at Madison Square Garden, where they have the Knicks, and they have the Rangers, and they have concerts and other events. They said it was very interesting to them that the Rangers fans tend to be season ticket holders and they come back for many games. The Knicks fans tend to be people not season ticket holders, but their fans will come back for 5 or 6 games in a season. And concert goers might go to a concert once every 2 or 3 years. And they said the Rangers fans, within a month, everything was just flowing. People knew what to do. They knew how to do it. They'd been there once or twice before, and away they went. Rangers fans took about 3 months for the average Ranger fan to just start flowing in and knowing what was going on and not looking for a place to dump all their metal in a bin. And the concerts, they know that concerts, these are people who are coming occasionally. They may not have seen the systems. And their security folks are now attuned to that. And they will staff accordingly, saying, okay, we've got a different demographic here for this type of event. Let's add a couple of extra staff to guide people, for example. And I think we saw the same thing when I was there for the concert at Anfield. Different demographics than your average soccer fan who'd been there 2, 3, 4 times already.
Yeah, and even the layout and ingress plan's different. So there will have been a lot of people who will have come to the ground for a football event, and when they arrive for a concert, they see they're not going through the same turnstiles. They may be going through a different ingress process to get pitch access. So yeah, very much a different type of audience and a very different ingress plan that needs to be managed. So yeah, you just got to be alive to that, and like you say, work a little bit harder with the stewards to sort of be more communicative, explain how things are working, and it works through.
Yep, agreed.
There's some great questions coming in from the audience, guys. To the audience members, thank you for the questions. Audience members, don't forget to put your questions in the questions tab if you can. I see there's some who are placing them in the chat tab. We'll get to those as well, but for convenience, if you don't mind, throw that question in the questions tab. I'm going to get to a couple right now, I think. One of them is from Mike Birch. Mike, thanks for the question. It's a pretty quick and simple one, I think, but he says, ticket scanning before screening or screening before ticket scanning? Who wants to jump on that?
Well, at Anfield, I've seen it done differently in different places. We believe you do your security screening, whether that be however you're doing it, whether you're using technology or not, well before you get to the turnstile, and then you screen you scan your ticket at the turnstile. So with Xtract One scanners, for example, we've offset them perhaps 5 meters away from the turnstile, give ourselves a bit of breathing space, individual scan through, and then straight to the turnstile, scan the ticket, and then into the stadium.
Yep, we've seen both in various venues, and it tends to be a North American versus European environment. We've seen some schools of thought that say, I like having ticket scanning in front because it creates a flow of people who then flow through the screening systems in a nice, orderly manner. So there's a benefit to that. Other organizations say, look, I don't want anyone in the venue who has a weapon. So I want to push security screening as far out from the venue as I can.
Yeah.
And you have a challenge when somebody is scanned their ticket, it's digitally torn. And if, say, they go through the ticketing first, and then they come to the screening, and they have a weapon, and they've got to go back to their car to dispose of it or something, you have to digitally untear the ticket, which can add complexity to the process. So, but there's benefits to both, and a lot of it comes down to what's the best for the venue, because every venue is, even every entrance might be different in every venue. Chris, gate B and E are very different than HIJ around the arena. And you might find, because of where that fence is, you might screen the tickets there and then scan, but other entrances you might do something different. So it really, the answer, Dan, comes down to, what's right for the venue. And often that same idea that we did with Liverpool, we ran a whole series of trials for multiple events to continuously fine tune until we knew exactly what the outcome was that was going to be optimized.
I think the other thing, just on that, I've seen, particularly in Europe, where the security coming into a stadium can be quite robust. They do a ticket screen, then a security screen, and then you scan your ticket into the stadium. So you do both. Your actual person screen is sandwiched in between two tickets. And you might call the first ticket check a soft ticket check. So at least the person's going into the screening process with a valid ticket, and then they actually only scan the digital ticket at the turnstile when they've been through that process, and that's when the count is. So I have seen it done that way as well. Again, that's adding a little bit of further complexity to the process, but if your security risks are such that that's what it needs, that's what it needs.
Yeah, I saw one other example, Dan, and again, it comes down to each unique venue. At some of the football clubs, there are certain stands meant for the home team and for the away team fans, and you don't really want the two mixing. And so there's a process to ensure that someone is not from an away team, doesn't have their colors on and they're going into the home team fans section in the stadium. And so in that case, they push ticketing out in front of screening. And they were also doing the screen for what kind of colors they were wearing. And they addressed that before they then got to the security screening. And that worked very well in terms of flowing that ConOps. But that would be very different on the other side of the arena or the stadium, where maybe you don't have to be as concerned about, screening for, the team colors.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Peter. Great answers and great question, Mike. Thank you for the question. Let's get to a question from John Giarci. John's question is to Chris: is there a return on investment in terms of reduced staffing, or have your numbers stayed the same?
This is a great question. When I pitched this to the company around investing in the scanners, I didn't major on that point. There's a valid reasons for that. So, in how our stadium operates with our student operation is, if previously we would have search teams on the screening process, and those search teams would then migrate as the stadium moved from phase 1, your ingress process, into a sort of phase 2 where the event's ongoing. So to reduce those numbers would have impacted on the efficacy of the student operation right the way through to phase 2 and phase 3. So when I first got into discussions with Peter about this, obviously he was quite clear that there are potentially opportunities for you to reduce your staffing numbers and make your operation a little bit more efficient. What we have done, obviously, where we've deployed the scanners on one of our main stands, that's allowed us to move resources from that place to other parts of the stadium to alleviate queues and deal with issues. So it's not necessarily made it more financially efficient, but it's made it operationally more efficient, because I've been able to put more resources where I might need them without further investment or cost. So yeah, if your stadium and your security operation works in a different way, where you've got a separate security entity to a crowd management steward, then there's definitely a business case for you. Rather than having 20 stewards searching on an instance, you would only have, I'll pick a number, 5 or 6 managing the scanners. So you can see that the case is made out if you choose to work it that way.
Yeah, we see the same thing in a number of different venues. And again, every venue is unique. Some venues are more, back to our original question, our first question, some venues are more focused on how can I enhance the guest experience, right? And have 75 people a minute flowing through a system without having to divest and personal intrusion, versus 6 people per minute, or 3, which we get from some arenas for their current security methodology. We have some arenas who are very, very data driven. The Sphere, for example, in Las Vegas, and they track data in unbelievable ways. They're unbelievable data scientists, and they've actually tracked increased revenue due to people being inside faster. And so they add that to their equation. For other venues, it's more about, like some of the venues we're in with Europe where they do pat downs. They're acknowledging we don't think this is very secure, and weapons risks have got to a higher place on the priority list, and therefore we have to make sure we're doing a full scan of the individual, not just their waist. So there could be different motivations for different venues. Could it generate more revenue? Could it reduce operational costs? Could it just be a better guest experience? And each venue is a little unique when we try and work with them. We do see what Chris sees, though, is there's some cases you might have an entrance or two where you're reducing staff. In other cases, it just allows you more efficient use of the existing staff. We had one arena that said for a typical event, they might have 400 people. When they took ticketing, security stewards, I think they were also including people who were managing the concessions, but on any given day, they could only get 250 people. That was all the available population that they could get to apply for jobs or outsource to. And so using technologies like us, with automated ticket scanning systems, with other technologies, they were able to serve their customers well with that maximum number of staff that they were able to acquire.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Peter. Thanks for the question, John. A lot of good questions from the audience. Let's get to another one. If you've got questions, audience members, go ahead and throw them in there. We'll try to get to as many as possible. This one from William Hebner. William, I apologize if I've mispronounced your last name. How do you combine Xtract 1 with secondary bag searching? What's the operation and layout of equipment and search tables?
Well, again, not to belabor a point, but it really depends on each venue. Some have very wide entrances. Some want to push systems out into the perimeter, like we did at Anfield, where we're outside the venue and there's a lot of space. In terms of the technology, bags can go through the technology. That's not a challenge. The underlying physics between technology like ours, other competitive technologies, even old metal detectors, is the same, and such that too much metal will cause an alert. And if somebody has a larger bag and they've got a lot of metallic personal items in there, a laptop, tablets, cell phones, things like that, it could cause a secondary screen alert, which is a false alert, or there could be a weapon or a prohibited item of some kind in there. And oftentimes the best process, since you've got 40, 50, 60, 70 people flowing in, is you want to keep that stream coming in. And so secondary screening is set off to the side. And there's things we've done with our technology so that we focus on what is the best mean time to ingress. Let me explain that a little bit more. Oftentimes, technologies are measured by vanity metrics, 3,000 people an hour, 75 people a minute. But that doesn't tell the whole story. The story that you want to examine is how long does it take a patron to go from A, outside, to B, inside, and their entire journey. So it does include things like secondary screening. And so there's things we've done with our technology to allow that person at secondary screening to run that process much more efficiently because of the data we're giving them and the insights we're giving them. So the best process is secondary screenings out the side. The systems will indicate where the suspected weapon or concerning item is. That allows secondary screening to go very, very quickly, with or without a bag search, depending on what the system tells them, while everyone else continues to stream in quickly.
I think the other thing to support that is we've done a lot of work over the last 3 years to minimise the number of larger bags that come into the stadium, and that includes having an off-site bag drop, which is advertised and people know about. We do have an exemption policy which people have to register with us before an event. But yeah, a lot of it then depends on your space available, and this comes up to, when you're determining which entrances you're going to deploy the scanners, factoring in the space to do your secondary, your bag searching. We've minimized the size of our bags to what we would call in the UK A5, which is quite small, and it works for us. And that also means that, you're not rummaging through a large bag to get to the bottom to find all sorts of people's belongings in there. So your policies at the start of it, your fan education piece, all that plays a part in it. But yeah, space, and again, having qualified stewards to pick off the bag and make sure that it gets searched appropriately.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, William, for the question. Another audience question, this one from Wayne Caesar, who I believe is in Turks and Caicos. And he says, where our sporting facilities and supporting infrastructure are significantly smaller and less advanced than a modern 60,000 seat stadium, how would you recommend that security providers realistically meet international safety and security standards?
That's a great question. I quite like that. And I think my first thoughts here, and Chris, please add to it. You've got more experience as an operator, but whether it's a 600 person, 6,000 person, or 60,000 person stadium, the only thing that changes is the zero on the end. The risks are still the same. people having too much alcohol, people getting into arguments, people carrying weapons, people who are disgruntled for some reason. And you want to create a safer environment for everyone who's attending that venue. We have arenas that we work with that have 1,200 people coming to a small regional sporting event. We also have the very large venues like Anfield. And so the size doesn't really matter. The problem to be solved is the same: creating a safer environment, leveraging technology for efficiency, and allowing the greater guest experience as people walk in. So I'm not sure what else you'd have to add to that, Chris.
Yeah, I think a number of months ago I did a conference. I spoke at a conference, and it was a joint sort of effort between myself from Liverpool Football Club and someone who does my job at a smaller football club in the UK called Lincoln City, who are further down the football pyramid, shall we say. And it was a counter-terrorism sort of conference, and the point was being made that I'm a 61,000 modern stadium. Well, not that modern, parts of it are modern, but a multi-billion-pound business that really shouldn't be squibbling over a few £1,000s to make sure its security regime's in good order. Vis-a-vis someone like Lincoln City, who are operating on very, very tight margins, and how do they make that work, and how do they make sure that their stadium is as safe as possible within those sort of confinements, if you like. And of course, a lot of it comes down to risk assessments, your threat assessments, and proportionality. And I think one of the big things that came out of the Manchester Arena bombing inquiry was that the basics were not in place. So whether that was staff awareness, staff briefing, staff training, all of these things don't cost a lot of money. And actually, notwithstanding that the technology is a significant part to play in your security overlay, the biggest first defense mechanism is your people, their eyes and their ears. And if you get that right, and if you're a smaller stadium with less infrastructure to invest in, if the basics are done right, then you will be in a really good place, and you can work from there. And that's how we contrasted the two sort of venues, if you like. Yes, if you can invest in technology, then you would be encouraged to do that. But the financial restrictions on a smaller venue are there to be seen. Notwithstanding, as Peter alluded to before, the investment in technology may be able to deliver your event in a far more efficient and effective way. So, that's where I said before, we wouldn't sort of necessarily reduce our student operation, because we've got a multifaceted problems to deal with on any event day. A smaller venue may use technology to make sure it delivers an event with the available staff it's got.
Yeah, and let me just add to that, Chris, too. I mean, very, very good points. It's one of the reasons that we almost insist with customers on doing some sort of a pilot or a demonstration. What we can write on a piece of paper in terms of numbers of staff saved or not, or ingress speeds or not, or increased levels of security or not. It's a paper exercise until someone tests it in their environment and starts to work out some of these things like the flow and the concept of operations, and do I put ticketing before or after, and to really kind of test and pressure test that ROI for their business model. And whether you're a 6,000 person stadium or 60,000, it may or may not be financially viable. It may or it may not be more secure. And until you actually go run it in the real world environment, it's really just a paper exercise. So give it a go, right? Who knows what comes out of it or what people learn.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Wayne, for the question. Peter, I'm going to ask you a question, and Chris, of course, you can chime in as well, but you've mentioned it here and there, but I think it'll be valuable to really solidify it for the audience. Talk us through how you think about success. What does success look like when you're working with a customer, and when it comes to safety, security, whatever it might be? But what's the best measurement of success in your opinion?
Wow. So many answers to that. Do you want to go first, Chris, or do you want me to go first?
I think I would suggest that first and foremost, using technology in this way is putting that customer experience, that customer service at the forefront of what you're trying to do. So your success factor to me is your supporter feedback. You know, our supporters have gone from a situation where they were queuing up, it was taking so long for them to get in, to basically they were all but walking into a stadium, you know. And the feedback from that has been really positive, which is why we've gone to the next step with it. So I think that's a big gauge of your success, because you've enhanced your security overlay you've achieved your objective with you've increased your security overlay and you've improved your customer experience, which is really difficult to do with most things. I think, you know, keeping the vendors, the data set. So we talked about how many people are you getting through how many, that's another indicator. Your alerts, what are you picking up? I think the other tiny success is, are we finding stuff? Are we alerted? Are we getting alerts on? Are people bringing stuff to the stadium that actually don't really need to bring to the stadium? That is just is that giving us problems? So you can then turn that back on its head and feed that back as to when you're doing your fan communications. So I think there's a couple of things. There's the metrics, as Peter talked about before, but there's actually that feedback off your fan that, you know, 10 minutes before the stadium's opening, your whole stands in the stadium, and you've got confidence that everybody's been screened.
Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 anecdotes, Chris. 100% agree with what you say. You know, there's the metrics that you measure on a weekly, quarterly, monthly basis, and looking for trends. How many more weapons were detected than previously? How fast are people in? Anecdotally, 2 or 3 examples, if you'll bear with me. We were at an NBA All-Star game that was being held at one of the arenas, and we actually had our systems as part of the trial at the VVIP entrance. The very, very important people like you, Chris, coming in. And so I was there with the team, and, we wanted to make sure everything was perfect. This was part of the NBA's analysis of, do they want to adopt the technology? And Adele, the singer, came through. And the NBA policy is secondary screening is always done or off to the side with a walk-through metal detector. That's their policy. So there's Adele, and she's walking in. She starts taking off her jewelry and heading towards the metal detector. And so I very politely said, no, you passed. Enjoy. And she looked at me, and she looked around at the systems, and she didn't even realize she'd been screened. And she goes, "That's it?" I said, "That's it." She went, "Swanky." So I immediately called our marketing team and said, "Rebrand our company. We're calling ourselves Swanky." The point of the anecdote is, if our customers are excited and happy, that's the win, right? And that's how we sort of measure success. And, Chris, in your environment, I remember seeing some of the, I think it was TikTok or Twitter posts that were out there in the January timeframe. People are unhappy with the, necessary increases to security, causing longer lines. And then once we'd implemented, there were some very nice posts about, gosh, the stadium, the team is listening to us, the fans. Isn't it great to be appreciated? And so to me, those are the kinds of things that are wins when the customers are happy.
Great anecdote, Peter. Thank you. Another question from the audience, this one from Lori Goodell. Lori says, are there any positive outcomes with UAS threats that you can share? UAS, I assume, meaning unmanned aircraft systems.
We aren't in the business of unmanned aircrafts and drones and things like that. So I don't really have any anecdotes I could speak to. Chris, do you have anything?
No, it's not an area of expertise that I've got. At the minute, we're dealing with in the UK some quite basic equipment to do with unmanned drones, and I think it's an area that's ripe for development. At the minute, it's very much eyes and ears and deploy a police officer to try and find a pilot. I'm sure there's tech out there that's going to make that process a lot less analog, shall I say.
I think Lori's given us another episode of SBJ Live down the line. So Lori, look out for that one.
Yeah, well, maybe the answer is to, as a friend of mine said, you can stop them, but just by spraying things, spray lead. He happens to be a gentleman from Texas with a shotgun. So
yeah, right. Bernard Tolliver says, Chris, today multiple tickets are purchased by one individual, downloaded to one device. How is your staff managing re-entry to seats, fans returning from concessions, etc.?
So I think the journey of digital ticketing is very much in its infancy. I think we've gone along the lines of restricting the number of tickets you can put on one device. I think your policies that sit behind your tech are key here. We've also got challenges with ticket forwarding. So, how many times can a ticket be forwarded from one device to another? So yeah, a lot of it is down to your policies around how many tickets can you download onto one single device. So I think you've got to put control measures in there and use the tech. I think use the tech to support it. A lot of it will depend on what system you're using, and also the biggest challenges with digital ticketing is, the differentials between the Samsung customer, as Peter is, to use a phrase, or the Apple. They're two very different operating systems and can cause you some issues, particularly when there's an upgrade done on one operating system. So yes, the thing with digital tickets is that issue of putting the control measures in place at points of sale with your policies as to how much you control. We've got bigger issues with phones appearing on what we call burner phones. So people will have an old phone that's just got the ticket on it. It's not used for anything else. It's of little monetary value other than to enable the ticket to get into the stadium. So there are challenges with it, but the first point is get your policies right. And if tech can support you, reduce the number of tickets you can download to one phone. Having multiple tickets on a phone presents all sorts of challenges at your turnstiles, some of which are safeguarding. So, let's say you've got an adult with an adult ticket and 3 children's ticket on a phone. Who comes through the turnstile first? If you get separated and there's a problem with the ticket, it can cause you problems. So it's as well putting limitations on it if your tech and your system allows you to.
We're going to get to a couple more, maybe one more audience question. I'm not sure if we'll have time to get to all of them, but I've got a couple questions that I want to make sure we leave the audience with as we think about when we depart today. And I think there are 2 of them. The first one is one that I would love both Peter and Chris to leave the audience with. Call it one thing that venue operators should focus on this year to improve both safety and guest experience, which is what we've really been talking about. How do you improve both of those? What would it be? I'll allow either of you to jump in, Chris or Peter.
Well, obviously we have a little bit of a bias because of, what we do and what our product is, but trying to step back more generally. The world is not getting safer. It's only getting more riskier. And unfortunately, security is one of those things that is below the line in terms of operating costs. And oftentimes is something that, gets cut from the budget, gets reduced out of the budget. It's not something that drives revenue, particularly in an arena with a very high focus on P&L and competition for the entertainment dollar. And so it's challenging for security organizations to, get the necessary budgets. But I think that what we're finding with a lot of venues is there is a way that execution of increased security can actually enhance the guest experience and can positively affect overall top line revenues and outcomes for the business. And so I would encourage anyone who's kind of in the security business. It's always challenging to get budgets. It's always challenging to get approval for something new. There always tends to be a bias towards doing what we've already done because we've never had an incident before. But just in the same way that I mentioned earlier, digital transformation has positively affected so many other aspects of our life, whether it is online banking or online commerce, or heck, my daughter got her education for 3 years during COVID through digital tools and technologies. I'd encourage people, take a look. You might find that there's an overall positive outcome similar to what we've experienced at Anfield. That's enhancing many aspects of the business operations.
Thank you, Peter. Chris, I'll flip it to you in just a second, but a reminder to the audience as we get towards the end here and we may be running out of time, upvote the questions that are in the questions tab that you want to make sure we get to. So please do that. Chris, go ahead. What's one thing you would recommend that people focus on?
I think linking into, I'm going to flip the coin from Peter's viewpoint of, you're getting that investment and raising awareness internally of how important security is and what the benefits are. I flip it on the other side and go to your supporters, your event goers. What we find is when we introduced any security measure over the last 18 months, whether that be bag policy, search, it's an imposition on somebody who's paying a lot of money to come and watch the game. And I've always going to encourage anybody to do is engage with your fan base, engage with your supporter base, and try to get them to understand that this is about keeping them safe. None of us want to be in a situation whereby we fail to do something and there is a catastrophe of any magnitude, and try to highlight the issue that, and this is where we've tried to get to with our fan base, is that it's not just our responsibility, that security is all of our responsibility. And I think if you can get open, it will make things a lot easier to bring change about. And that also factor in that service element, because you can take in the viewpoint of your event goer, your supporter, your patron, however you want to call them. If you've got them on side, they will assist you with the process, as opposed to you doing something to them, irrespective of whether that's technology enabled or anything else.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Peter. Let's get to this last audience question from Nick Goffredo. Nick says, most venues I worked with will contract their security out to third-party companies that hire part-time employees. How do you balance the implementation of technology and policies with staff that you don't directly hire or train and may only work at your venue a small handful of times a year?
Why don't you start with that one, Chris? I've got some observations, but I'm going to leave it to the operator to comment first.
Yeah, I think, look, I don't know what it was like. I don't know how it was in the US. In the UK, COVID, the entertainment industry or the leisure industry struggled coming out of COVID. A lot of previous employees, whether they were stewards, kiosk staff, all manner of occupations that you have running an event, went and found that alternative work and didn't come back to the industry. And we've been fighting that since COVID. Indeed, in recent times, the Mayor of London has just announced an academy to make sure that safety and security personnel are qualified because of the challenges they've got in London, particularly with the number of venues and the sort of pool of resources that they're dipping into. Wembley Stadium, but by way of an example, could have up to 25 contractors on site for an event, and that's going to be really difficult to manage. I'm blessed at Anfield. We've always held on to our own stewarding population for crowd stewards and for most of the other functions, and we've got a core security function provided by a third-party provider who's our regular contractor, running 365 days a year at the stadium. So we where we have got an issue is we do bolster our stewarding population on a match day with a third-party contractor, and it is a challenge to make sure that those staff are trained. But what we would do is we would put them in roles which are less impactful, and make sure that our staff are doing the key roles, because you know that they're doing the key role in the area that they know. They understand the fan base, and they understand, if you're using tech like we are on one of our stands, they understand how it works. But it is a challenge, and I think it's continually rebriefing and continually retraining, which can become laborious, but I think it's important.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Chris, from the technologist perspective. I've always been a big believer in customer back, not product forward approaches to, developing solutions. And that means you go out to your customers and you sit there and you watch the operations, multiple events in a row, and you notice things like, 25, 30% of the stewards are different every event, for example, when you've outsourced. And Chris, the same issue occurred post-COVID of just not being able to get enough good staff. So there's things that you can do as a technologist to make that easier. You know, and the analogy I would give is think of a point of sale terminal with your credit card at the grocery store 10 years ago. That whole thing could be still clunky, but over time it's gotten better and better and better and better. So you just tap your card and away you go. And, you know, technology can continuously improve to take the people and the processes out of the equation more and more. So for example, if someone walks through our system, as Chris said, maybe the less familiar stewards, they're the ones who have to just read green light, red light, left, right. Pretty simple to train someone on that. The more seasoned security staff, who are the people on staff, using Anfield example, they're the folks who are at secondary screening, where you want to have the attention to the security details. And so there's things that technology can do, recognizing that you do have this changing staff, but to make it simpler for that staff and the technology to take on more and more of the heavy work and the heavy lifting.
That's where we will end this episode of SBJ Live. Chris and Peter, thank you so much for the time. This has been Safe, Seamless, Sold Out, Reimagining Security for Modern Sports Venues, presented by Xtract One. Thank you to Peter and the Xtract One team for the support. Thank you to Lou and Sarah for doing all the work behind the scenes. Thank you to the audience for spending time with us. We're back next week with another episode of SBJ Live every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find those episodes on sportsbusinessjournal.com and register. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Dan.
Cheers.